Welcome back. In the previous lecture, we understood how do we work with the strings. Now, as a part of this lecture, we'll try to understand how do we work with dates and timestamps. Whenever you are dealing with the data, one of the important column or one of the important data is dates and timestamps. Because let us say you are trying to deal with the retail data. You want to see when the customer purchased a particular item, if there is a return provision. That is one of the example. Or if you want to check when the patient recovered, you need to see when the patient got admitted to the hospital. So there are various scenarios where date and timestamp is one of the important data to be handled. As a part of the Spark, it enables us to handle the date and timestamps in two ways. One is the dates. The plain date, it will not have any timestamp. It will have only the date, the calendar date. The second one is the timestamp, which include both the date and also time information. Let us say you are trying to create a data frame by reading the data from a file, either JSON or CSV or any of the raw data source. Now, when you are trying to create a data frame by reading a raw data source, you have multiple options. One of the options would be infer schema. When you infer schema, it will try to identify the date columns as much as possible and ensure that the date and timestamp column is identified properly. It will build a schema with that. In most of the cases, as for the what are the data which I am using, definitely it has identified the timestamp correctly. But when you are trying to create your own schema, it is better to explicitly define whether it is a timestamp or a date. That also need to be done. Now, Spark timestamp type class supports only second level precision. So if you want to go for a third level precision, you need to write a custom code for that. The way Spark is leveraging Java regular expression, in the same way, here also it is working with the Java dates and timestamps. Since it is working with the Java dates and timestamps, it conforms to those standards. Most of the times, even if you have attended my Hive class, I have explained you that in most of the big data world, what we will do is we will try to store the date and timestamps as the strings, because it is easy to store, easy to process, easy to retrieve the data. That is the reason, even though date and timestamps are there, we will try to store that as a strings. Then whenever we want to go ahead and use them, we will convert them into date types at the runtime. So let us see what are the different functions which we can use to deal or to handle the date and timestamps. So there are a couple of functions, like we have a current date, we have a current timestamp, we have a couple of functions like date add and date subtract. What current date does is it will try to capture the current date according to the system. What are the system you are using, it will try to capture the current date. And the current stamp will try to capture the current timestamp, that includes date and timestamp. Date subtract will try to subtract the date from a given column. Let us say here what we are trying to do here is we are trying to get the column today and trying to subtract 5 days from that. And here we are trying to add 5 days to the column today. That's it. The next way is you can also try to get a difference between the two dates, that is date diff. And one of the very common thing in big data world, including Spark, is to store the dates as strings. But you want to really process the date in the way it need to be used. In that case, we need to use a function called toDate. How do we use it? Very, very simple. We already know dateDiff function. We can just say dateDiff function. We can provide the columns between which we want to find the date difference. That is how we use it. And you can specify a toDate, mention the column name in which the date is stored as a string. That's it for now. Let us try to see this in a practical class. Let us see how do we implement all these things as a part of our hands-on exercises. Let us try to construct a data frame. The name of the data frame would be date data frame, and we'll have some range of values, and we'll add a couple of columns. Let's get started. First and foremost thing is we got to import functions. Which are the functions we have to import? First thing is import current date and current timestamp. As we have already discussed as a part of the conceptual class, these are the two important functions Spark supports: current date and also timestamp. Let us go ahead and import this first. As I've indicated multiple times, we import the individual functions so that you get more practice, you are aware of those functions. Now let's go ahead and build the data frame. The data frame date df is equal to, we'll say Spark, because we are trying to create data frame for the first time. Let's say range. Let us have only 10 values. It will be easy for us to understand. So then what we'll do is we'll add a column with the with column, and as we know, with column takes two arguments, the name of the column, and also here what we'll do is current date. So since it is a function, we need to put the braces. I got to give this, and then I will copy this whole thing and make the current timestamp. I'll say current time. I got to change this timestamp. There you go. We are done with creating a data frame. Let's go ahead and execute this code. With this, we would have created a data frame with 10 values 0 to 9 and current date and current timestamp. Let's go ahead and execute this. There you go. Let us go and see the data frame. You can see today's date is captured because the first function what we have used is current date, and the second function is current timestamp. The name of the column is today and current time. And as I said, we have added a range of values from 0 to 9. We learned how to use current date and current timestamp. Whenever you have a data frame, if you want to add these two columns, you can use these two functions. Now that we saw, let us see how do we subtract and how do we add. That we can do by using couple of functions like date subtract and also date add. So what are the data frame which we created now? We'll try to use the same thing and add couple of days and subtract couple of days. Let's do that now. As I said, we got to import those functions as well. Import date. We have very intuitive functions, date add and date subtract. No need to by heart them. They are very intuitive. Now that we have created a date df, let's try to use the same thing. Okay, we'll say select date add, then we have to give a column to which we have to add the date. Okay, column. Here the column is today. We'll add some, how many days, what are the number of days you want to add. Go ahead and add this. Let us say some 7 days. We got to know. Okay, now then we can use the same thing. Let me go ahead and copy this. Instead of typing, let us subtract the days also. Let us say sub. There you go. I think everything is perfect. Let's go ahead and execute this guy. We are adding 7 days and we are subtracting 7 days for today's column. So this is the column. Let's go ahead and execute this. So there you go. Yes, we have added 7 days to today and we have subtracted 7 days today. To make it more intuitive, what we will do is we'll rework on this and let us choose today's column as well. So that way we'll get to know how we have added, how we have subtracted. Let us go ahead and execute this. This is the today's column. We have added 7 days. 8 plus 7 is 15. And this is subtracted column. We have subtracted 7 days. It has become 1st December 2020. Awesome, right? We learned how do we capture the current date and how do we add or subtract. Let's move on. The next functions are, we have date diff and toDate. ToDate is very, very important because as we have already discussed, most of the times we tend to store the dates also as strings. So whenever we want to calculate and do manipulations, we have to convert the strings into the dates. For that, toDate function is very, very important. First, let us go ahead and see this. And there is one more function called months between. We'll see that as well. Let's go ahead and import functions. We got to import date diff. We have a function called date diff, and we have a function called toDate. And also we have a function called months between. Let's go ahead and import them. Okay, there you go. We have imported. Let us build something around this. First and foremost thing is we'll try to add a column called week ago to understand how do we subtract the date. Date df. We'll go ahead and add a column called with column. This column, what I will do is, as we know, week ago, 1 week ago, this is the name of the column, and we'll use the subtract. I'll see this guy. I'll review the same thing here. Now we have added a column. Then let's go ahead and try to get a difference between today and a week ago. I will say select. I'm trying to find the difference between today and a week ago. Date div, and then all we have to do is we have to give both these columns. Date div column. Then we have to give today and column week ago. We are trying to use a function week ago and try to find the difference between these two. Let me see, this is fine, but we need to have one more. This is show. Let's go ahead and execute this. We have taken a difference from today to a week ago. Week ago is a column which we added. What we did is we added a column called week ago and we used our today's date and subtracted 7 days from there. So now that we are trying to find a date difference between today and week ago, it is coming to 7 days, which is accurate. Now that we understood this, we'll try to build a function to test how do we create a toDate. First thing is I'll say how do we use a toDate, date df, and what I will do is we'll use a let function here. So toDate, and then toDate is a function we have to give arguments here. What I will do is let, and for that the function will provide a 2017. Let's say some random date I'm just giving 01. Then that's it. We'll just go ahead and see this how it works. So toDate show. Okay, I'm using a toDate function here. So let me go ahead and execute this. We have a toDate. So, but how do we know this? This lit is converted into toDate. All we can do is we can just go ahead and say print schema. It will give the schema of this particular column. You can see it is date. Now that we understand toDate, one more usual scenario is you already have a data frame. You have read the data frame from a file. So for example, in this case, we have something called df retail, which I have been using. If I go ahead and print the schema, which I have already created, df retail is a data frame which we have created by reading a file. If you observe here, you see invoice date is a string. Assuming that we want to manipulate this, we want to add some days and all those things, then obviously this date need to be converted from string data type to date data type. We can use a toDate function to do that. Let us try to do that now. Same thing, all I have to do is, let me reuse this. I will go ahead and say df retail. There you go. Select toDate. Instead of this one, I'll go ahead and give the name of the column. That's it. It is as simple as that. Let me go ahead and give the invoice date. This is the case. So now, how do we know this is a date? Go ahead and print the schema of this. You'll get to know this is invoice date has converted from string to the date. This is a very important scenario. Please remember, whenever you have created a data frame by reading a file, if your data frame has read a date column as a string, then for your manipulations, you have to convert that into a date by using a toDate. Very simple. Use a toDate and provide the column for which you want to convert a string into date. That's it. Now that we have seen this, we'll try to build on top of this. I'll use this one and then I will go ahead and say alias and provide the name as start. I will copy this. Wherever possible, you reuse your code so that it avoids typing. I will make this 2018. I'll tell you, I'm trying to use a function months in between here, months between function. Alias, I'll say end date. Okay, this is the end date. Now I will need to use a function months between. The way I will do it is I got to select, so select and then months between function. Between those two columns I'm trying to find the how many months are there. So what are these? Start date, and so I got to provide the column in double quotes, otherwise it will throw a error. This one end date. Think we are done. Let's go ahead and execute this. There you go. So we have a how many months are between the start date and end date? We have -12. Just to fix this, what you can do is you can go ahead and change the instead of change the column, just make it as an end date and then make it as a start date. So instead of this one, we'll get the, so let's go and execute this guy. Okay, we'll get the how many months are between these two dates. Wonderful. I think we are done with all the hands-on exercises of dates and timestamps. Please do pay attention, practice at your convenience and become really good. Thank you.